One of my fondest memories from being a parent is when our children were younger, being able to sit in the rocking chair and hold them close. And I can still feel their soft breath on my neck as we just sat together. And I'm thinking that today we're going to hear about how God holds us close. So I would like to introduce Teresa, Watje, and Jenita Pace, her daughter, and they're going to share with us how they were surprised by God.
Thank you. Yeah. This is kind of hard. I don't know what to do. Well, good afternoon. Oh, we're so happy to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Well, sometimes when we read a book, we might be tempted to look at the last few pages to see how the story ends. But my standing here today tells you that my story ends really good. So I want to begin by some words of a song that I heard recently that I think kind of captures what some of the things that I would like to share with you today. And it goes like this. I don't know if you've ever heard this song. It was one I had never heard before and never heard since. But sometimes it takes a mountain, sometimes a troubled sea, sometimes the desert to get a hold of me. But your love is so much stronger than anything I see. Sometimes it takes a mountain to trust and believe. Well, some 3 years plus ago, I was running the race of life as fast as I can, and my body, my mind constantly was multitasking. And it was here and there and everywhere, and I was growing more impatient and demanding and difficult when I look back. Then one day, God just stopped me in my tracks, and I do mean that literally. Oh, let me take you back to February 17 of 2016. Galen and I had driven to Oklahoma to help our son John, who's here today, move into a townhouse. And the day after we arrived, in the morning, I felt some tingling in my right arm, and then a little later, a little bit in the left. And, I thought about it, but didn't really want to go in with those symptoms. And then about supper time, I could feel the same sensation in both of my legs. Well, we intended to leave the next day anyway, and so we decided let's get to bed early, and then we'll get up early, and then we'll drive home, and it's about 12 hours. And so that's what we did. We got up at 4 in the morning, started driving, started calling people about 8 in the morning, and everyone we call, like the doctor's office and my sister and a friend that's a nurse, they all said, well, you might want to stop at a hospital at the emergency room. Just have them, check it out a little bit, now. So outside of Kansas City, we stopped, and they did some tests to rule out some of the major things like heart attack and stroke, and they weren't sure what it was, but they said it is coming so gradually, some sort of paralysis that you could check in here, but if you wanted, they agreed, we could get home in the next 6 hours. And that's what we chose to do, and checked into Abbott Northwestern on February 19th at about, early in the morning. So right away they suspected Guillain-Barré, and I had never heard of that, and I don't know how many of you heard about it before I had it. Anybody, pretty much? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, Guillain-Barré is rare, but it's a serious autoimmune disease, or disorder, I should say, and the body's immune system mistakenly attacks your nervous system. And there is no cure. There's no surefire way to get the immune system to stop. But once the attack does stop, the cells will try to repair themselves for up to about 2 years. Well, they knew right away I had very severe damage, and early on they said that I probably wouldn't walk again, or worse yet, I wouldn't survive. And so those first 2.5 weeks in intensive care, that's when my family really went through kind of a roller coaster of feelings and emotions.
So on February 17th, I'm in North Carolina. That's where we live, my husband and my son. And I got a phone call from my parents saying that my mom was having these symptoms. This is before they knew what was going on. And so that night, after I got off the phone, I did what all of us Americans do. I got online and started diagnosing her, right? We're all doctors in America. So I went onto WebMD and I typed in the symptoms, and I was scrolling through the options. As you know, you read the least severe to the most severe. And I got to the bottom of the list and saw Guillain-Barré. I'd never heard of it before. And as I read it, I thought, oh dear, I hope it's not that. And I went to bed that night, and I remember praying, asking God, Lord, let it not be that. And, you go to bed at night thinking, God, protect my family, and you sleep. And I woke up, and I had a text from my dad. And there was no text to it. It was just a picture. But it was a picture of a whiteboard, and it just said Guillain-Barré. And it was hanging outside of her hospital room. And I just started crying, because I knew, thanks to WebMD, what that might entail. And so I called my father, and I got on a plane, and I was flying up to Minneapolis. And when I landed, I thought, well, we'll go to lunch, get my stuff home, and then we'll go to the hospital. And when my dad picked me up, he said, she's just been moved to ICU. We have to go to the hospital now. And so we got to the hospital, and she was in ICU, and the paralysis was kind of like quicksand, just moving its way up. And the doctors were explaining to us that unless something stopped, it was going to reach her vital organs. It was going to reach her lungs and her heart and her stomach. And so we had a conversation about what that would look like, and they assured us that doesn't always happen. But 24 hours later, they were rushing in saying she was about to not be able to breathe anymore. And so they gathered us in the room, and they said, say goodbye. So what do you say? Sorry. So we all stood in the room, my brother Carl, and we just said goodbye. And they said, we don't know when she'll speak again, or if she'll speak again. And so my dad said, I wish it was me, and that was it. And it was silence for months. And what we didn't know was that not only would she not be able to breathe, but she would lose complete control of all of her body, except for her ability to shake her head, even her eyes. She wouldn't be able to close her eyes anymore. And so it began the journey of trust, right? But at that moment, we didn't know that we were going to be in silence now for months.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, well, again, there was no cure for GBS, but there are 2 treatments that's available. And the most favored treatment is IVIG. And they gave me rounds and rounds of that treatment over and over. But there still was no sign of movement, and no indication that the attack, had stopped. So after ICU at Abbott, they moved me to Bethesda because they can handle patients on a ventilator. And it was there on March 23rd, a little over a month since it all started, that they decided that the IVIG treatments weren't helping, and that they would go then to the last available treatment, which was plasmapheresis. And that's like getting a plasma transplant.
So it was weird going every day because because she was totally paralyzed, we had to have people come and take shifts because she couldn't call for the nurse if she needed help and she couldn't speak. So we were learning to use a spelling board to try to communicate, or she would try to mouth words and we would try to read what those words were. So every day I would go, have my shift, and it's weird when you spend a day with someone but you still miss them. So I would be with her for 3 hours, and then I would go home and call her voicemail to hear her voice, or watch old videos because I wanted to remember what she sounded like. And so the plasmapheresis treatments were very intense. So it was basically they would come in and they would hook her up to this machine that would cycle her blood through and take out her plasma and replace it. So those of you that donate plasma, I just want to say thank you because you're the reason that we're here today. And so one day they showed up with their plasma machine, and she was having a panic attack. Her heart rate had spiked, and her breathing was shallow, and she had this wild look in her eyes, and I could not figure out what she was trying to tell me, and I was spelling words, and I was begging her, please calm down, because they said we can't start until she's calm. And I was brushing her hair, and I was singing, and I was running out of ideas, and they were waiting. And I think it was just the stress of all of it, I finally just broke down, and I just fell by her bed, and I just said, God, please do something. And it's funny that prayer was my last resort. And right at that moment, it was like Jesus was at the other side of the bed. Have you ever had that feeling when you thought you saw movement out of the corner of your eye, but maybe you just missed it? And it was amazing. It was that moment that I realized that Jesus was on the other side of the bed with me. We were doing this together. And all of a sudden, she just relaxed and she fell asleep. And her breathing resumed to normal, and her heart rate calmed down. And it was amazing because the nurses were there, and we all witnessed it together. And I could tell they were wondering, what had just happened. And it was in that moment I had just an epiphany that I'll never forget. And it was the realization that I wasn't praying to a God who was on a cloud watching us play this out, right? I was praying to a God who was actually in the room every second of every day. But not only was he experiencing my pain, but he was going home with my parents, my dad and myself, and we were crying at night in bed. And he was there with my brother in Oklahoma, who was having to hear about this and experience it alone. And he was with my husband in North Carolina, who was trying to maintain our family in my absence. And so it's amazing, the Holy Spirit being one with our spirit, I think he was experiencing all of it. And I realized that God was in even more pain than I was in, because he was with all of us. And it was the first time I realized that the Holy Spirit is one with us. So I no longer pray. When I'm going through pain, I no longer ask God, why am I going through this? I ask him, why are we going through this as a team? Why do we experience this together? It was really faith-changing for me. So at that moment, as I continued on in my journey, I realized my prayers were shifting to much more intimacy with my God.
All right. Okay, well, continuing on, and I know these things through the Caring Bridge site and also being told by those that were living it from a different perspective. But they were about ready to give up with the plasmapheresis treatment like they had with the IVIG, because there just were no signs that it was working. And then the doctor ordered one more round of treatments, and then, by God's grace, I moved my thumb. And it was a sign that the attack was over. My body could start to repair itself. It had been 73 days up to that point since it all began, and it was April 1st, 2016. Well, one day, while Jenita was playing one of my favorite Christian songs that became more and more my favorite song, because Tim played that for me and introduced me to it, and it was about God helping in a time of crisis. But I do distinctly remember thinking, I always assumed that if I ever really needed God in a really bad way, like right now, God would show up in just a big way, and he'd be so obvious to me. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling. And I thought, where are you, God? Because I was not feeling it. Why don't I feel you? Why don't I see you? It just didn't seem right. And then I did see God in human form. I had been seeing him. I was seeing him in those coming that embody the Holy Spirit. And this, no lie, I really got the connection. They came ministering and caring and loving, and it was all of you that were praying for me. It was my family, my siblings, my friends. God was there. That was big. Well, it became evident to my family early on, as you can probably imagine, that I would need 24/7 coverage 24/7 because I couldn't move, to call the nurses, and I couldn't tell them what I needed. And so Galen and Jenita and Tim and Carl and my sister Mary tried to cover all those hours, 24/7, sit with me all night long when I woke up to call the nurse to come in so I could get more medicine and get my needs taken care of. And they realized they couldn't do it. And so my other 5 siblings returned from their vacations, and they took turns, on the shifts, and relieving my one oldest sister from the nights. She needed some help there. And Galen was taking all morning with me, and Jenita or Tim took big shifts, and Carl. But when they asked others, someone from the Trinity family actually set up a schedule, and I have some months up here, and they asked people to sign up for 4 to 6 hours to sit with me. I still can't believe that. And but they had more people signing up than there was room for. And some of you and some that were doing that. And I just can't imagine, when I think about it, sitting with someone who can't talk for 6 hours. You have to carry on the entire conversation, and yet they've got plenty of needs. I mean, you're suctioning their throat. I mean, you're doing things that I can't imagine doing for me. And but they were Jesus to me. That was Jesus to me. I always had someone to focus on 24/7. So my mind never went to, oh, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to be like this the rest of my life? All the things that your mind could do, isn't that just a gift from God? And I think it had to do very much with that one person. I wasn't left alone with myself. Well, they came with smiles and, they'd tell me about their lives. That was the best. And they had Bible verses and books to read and music. And, I got wheelchair rides, gifts and cards and flowers and hugs and kisses and massages. And it all was just all those wonderful things. And then I want to tell you, God provided in some very unusual ways. And one way I like to share is, when my legs and arms were so paralyzed, and especially my legs were always so uncomfortable. I'd want people to move them, but then they'd move them, and 5 seconds later they were uncomfortable again. And I've developed phantom arms and legs. And when the lights went off at night, they came alive. My arms weren't much good because I couldn't pull the covers up with them, but my legs I could put down through the bed. I could swing them, and I even soaked them in water some nights. So isn't that great? God either made our minds so amazing, it was the way I coped, or it was just, he just cares for us that much. He just gave them to me. They did go away, I want you to know. I still don't have them. Okay. Well, I want to tell you how I was ministered to and some of the things I saw, but I was ministered through the Caring Bridge site, and I have it here today. And the Caring Bridge site was just a remarkable way that Galen and Jenita could process their thoughts and then get the information to you so you knew what was happening. And as a result, I know, especially this group, you read it, you prayed for what they asked, and then you wrote on it. And you told them stories of times that you had in your life that were similar. And Galen would read it to me every day. And it's over 300 pages, and it's an absolute treasure to me. I try to read it through every year. And it's on the table with other just keepsakes that were in my drawer. Not everything that I have, but every one of those things represents a person. Like the cards. These are only half my cards because I keep the other half in Florida, and I read them like a devotional. So that's just a hint where when you send a card, you don't know how long that person might keep it. Well, the big thing too, because this really is something I want you to know, is I know you were praying for me, and the amazing power of prayer. Someone in here calls me a miracle woman. And, I really felt like the man who was lifted down through the roof in front of Jesus. And it says that Jesus saw their faith. And you wanted me front and center in front of Jesus. And Jesus saw your faith. And God honored your prayers, and no matter how he might have answered, because we know there could be other answers, it would have been okay because I was bathed in prayer. We knew he heard it, our prayer, and then he does what's best.
And when Mom and I were talking about that story of the faith of these four friends who lower this person they care about, and I noticed it was four people. It wasn't just one person, and it was. I struggle with pride, and I don't like asking for help. I don't. I think, I'm assuming some of you experienced that too. And it was such a humbling opportunity to learn what it means to ask, to have yourself spiritually paralyzed and have other people lowering you in front of Jesus. I mean, what an honor and a gift. And when we would go home at night, my dad and I and Carl and I know John and all of us were reading the Caring Bridge, and we would see names and we would talk about all of you and who you were and your faith and your stories. We read every comment, every prayer, every card. And it was continued. It's like you were every day lowering us in front of Jesus. And I can't thank you enough. And what you may not realize is then when we would go to her room and we would have this supernatural hope and energy, the nurses and the doctors would be shocked. And so your prayers were like an aroma of Jesus in that hospital. I mean, neighboring rooms would come talk to us and want to know, like, who are all these people and what are all these cards and all these verses on her wall. So you have no idea how many people you've impacted. And in fact, there might be people walking with Jesus today because of your prayers, because you lowered us in front of Jesus. And as he worked in our lives, that aroma was just filling the hospitals we were in.
Okay, well, my condition continued to slowly improve, and I spent 2.5 months at Bethesda, and then I went to Benedictine, which is a high-skilled facility, and there I learned to swallow and to talk, get off the ventilator, get off all the other tubes, and then Galen would take me for a wheelchair ride every day in downtown Minneapolis. There I went in my hospital gown, pillows under my hands and pillows under my feet and swaddled in a blanket. But what a sweet memory that will always be. And almost 6 months to the day that I checked into the hospital, I left on August 28th of 2016. And I still didn't have much movement. I was in a wheelchair, and they would need to pivot me, if you know how that would go, from the chair to the bed, to the toilet, to different places. And they had to shower me and dress me and brush my teeth and comb my hair. I mean, I required constant help, like a baby, during waking hours. But over all those months, God changed Galen and I. Galen became a willing caretaker. He stepped down from his beloved teaching for the time, and he felt called to be a servant, and that was something he told me that he never had a specific call to be. And he saw and believes to this day that servanthood is the highest calling that you can have, because Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. And Galen has and continues to care for me, because there's many things I cannot do. And I too have changed. I become less wound up in life, about life. I'm much more calm and patient. I'm more concerned about people than I am accomplishment. I think that's something I had to learn. And I was taught how to love, and more than I had ever loved before. And we have a place in Florida that we go to in the winter, and when it came time that year to go to Florida, we left with a wheelchair, but I never used it again. I started using my walker, then I got to using canes, and then now I'm only in my braces. And we are on a new road of life. Someone in a card said, don't think you're on a detour to get back to the road, right? No, this was a new road, and we needed to enjoy the beauty of this new road. So I will always walk with braces, and I'm limited in my strength and balance. But God has changed us for the better. He's given us new work to do for Him, especially in our place in Florida and back here. And He's bringing new people in our lives daily. We kind of expect it now because we're so people focused. And so we really are, every day seeing how God is working. And my braces are really kind of a hidden blessing because, especially in Florida, they're kind of like a billboard. I'll have people approach me all the time and want to know what happened to me. But it gives me the opportunity to tell them the story and tell them, about God in the story. So yes, God got a hold of us, but we've grown in the trust and belief in Him and His Word.
And I learned so much. I can't even capture all of it, but one thing I noticed is early on I worried every night. I'd go to bed and I'd read all the articles I could find on Gambare. You know what that's like when you're going through something and by the end of the week you know everything about it because it suddenly applies to your life. And I was constantly worried. But then I realized when Paul talks about us running a race, we have our eye on the prize and we're running. And we can't successfully run if we're trying to carry people and drag them with us. And I realized that I can't control the situation. I have no say in whether or not my mother recovers. And so the worry was energy that I was spending when really what I needed to do is do what those friends did and lower her before Jesus. And so I had been working really hard to try to carry her in vain, thinking that I could save her, and really coming to the point where I would go to bed at night. And some nights I was still so worried that I would close my eyes and I would picture myself wrapping her up like an infant and handing her to Jesus and saying, I can't do it. And it was that practice of doing that every day. And it taught me more and more about releasing. So my encouragement to you is if there's someone that you're trying to carry, to go to bed at night knowing that you can turn them over. And there's such a freedom in that. It's scary to do. And he and I would, at night, God would we'd have these laughing conversations because there I am trying to take it back, And he'd say, no, trust me. But one reason that I could trust is because, when you were coming to the hospital and when you were sending those messages, the God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. So you were literally delivering that supernatural strength to our family. And I saw it every day. People were doing our laundry. People were buying us groceries, making meals. I can't even tell you how much it meant. And I still feel that, and it still impacts my life. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to conclude now, but I do, off script, I want to be sure to thank you for the night that you designated for prayer here at Trinity. And that really is something I will always be thankful for. Well, in conclusion, for all of us, whether we have or we are or will face that mountain in life, that impossible situation, unthinkable, and you wonder how you're going to get through it. Or you face a troubled sea. I think of the unrest in our lives, maybe a strained or broken relationship. Difficult people that you're dealing with, or just irritations. Or a desert like I felt I was in, wondering where is God in this situation? It's like then the song, these things are the things that draw us closer to God and closer to His love. So we will trust Him and have greater belief in His every word. So Jenita and I, we pray the God of hope will fill you with joy and peace as you trust Him.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for letting us share, guys.